The courtroom is supposed to be a place of order, silence, procedure, and control. Yet on this day, none of those rules held. From the moment the doors closed and the cameras began recording, the air carried a tension that felt less like law and more like theater. Everyone in the gallery could sense it. Something was about to happen that would escape the usual rhythm of legal drama. The hook came fast. A sharp rap of the gavel echoed across the chamber, followed by the words that froze the entire room. The judge leaned forward, his voice dripping with authority, and delivered a warning so pointed, so unrestrained, that it sent shockwaves through the gallery. In that instant, order broke down not in noise, but in silence. You could almost hear the collective gasp, a ripple of disbelief that swept across every row. And that is where we begin, because this was no ordinary courtroom session. This was a live drama broadcast to millions. And once the warning left the judge's lips, there was no taking it back. Imagine sitting in the audience. You expect routine testimony, the dry hum of legal jargon, lawyers sparring politely. Instead, what you witness is a display of power and pressure that feels more like a political stage than a court of justice. The judge's warning wasn't just a cautionary note, it carried weight, anger, and something more dangerous, personal emotion. Why did it matter? Because when those in power lose composure, the cracks show. And in that crack, the world glimpsed a truth the system tried to bury, that even judges, cloaked in robes and tradition, are human. They can lose control. They can go too far. The lawyer at the center of it, calm, sharp, ready, knew this. You could see it in the way they held their posture, refusing to flinch. They had pushed the right button, exposed the right weakness, and suddenly the entire case shifted. What was once about evidence and testimony was now about ego and restraint. That is why the room held its breath. Because this wasn't just law, it was a battle of wills, a clash between authority and defiance. And as the judge's words rang out harsh, biting, over the line, the cameras captured everything. Millions at home didn't just see a warning. They saw something bigger, a moment where dignity and arrogance collided and the mask of power slipped. The gallery was silent, but their silence said everything. Eyebrows raised, lips parted, eyes wide. Even the stenographer, trained to remain stone-faced, shifted slightly in her chair. The moment was electric. Now here is where the commentary comes in. Ask yourself, what happens when authority reveals its cracks? When the system designed to command respect shows emotion that borders on bias? For the audience in that courtroom and for the millions watching, it wasn't just about the case anymore. It was about the symbol of justice itself and whether it had just faltered. But let's rewind. Because before this warning, before this jaw-dropping turn, the day began like any other. The attorneys filed in, stacking papers, whispering strategy. The defendant sat stiffly, adjusting his tie, trying to mask fear with bravado. Reporters scribbled notes, anticipating a headline but not knowing what kind. The judge entered with his usual air of superiority, shoulders squared, jaw tight. He was known for his control, for running a strict courtroom where no one dared cross him. His gavel was his weapon, his tone his shield. But today something was different. Perhaps it was the media glare or the rising political undertones of the case. Perhaps it was fatigue. Or perhaps it was the attorney across from him, a figure who seemed immune to intimidation. The tension built slowly, like the tightening of a drum. The prosecutor delivered opening remarks, grand and inflated. The defense rose, cutting through the noise with precise, sharp statements that landed like punches. The clash was inevitable, but no one knew the spark would come so soon. It came during cross-examination. The attorney leaned in, voice steady, pressing a witness on details that contradicted the state's claims. The witness stumbled. The gallery stirred. And then the moment. The attorney pushed one step too far, or perhaps exactly far enough. The judge, visibly irritated, slammed his gavel and launched into a warning that was meant to silence. But here's the twist. Instead of silencing, it amplified. The more the judge spoke, the more the audience realized he wasn't just keeping order, he was losing it. The warning became a spectacle, and the spectacle became the story. Cameras zoomed in on his face, jaw tight, eyes narrowed. They caught the attorney's reaction too calm, composed, unflinching, The contrast was stark. One looked rattled, the other unshaken. One clung to authority, the other radiated control. And in those few seconds, the courtroom audience knew they were watching something historic. Not a routine hearing, not just another trial, but a moment that would replay in clips across social media, dissected by pundits, shared with captions like, "Judge goes too far." Ask yourself again, how does power look when it is rattled? How does truth respond when threatened? Because this is where the real drama begins. The warning itself was only the spark. The firestorm it ignited, both inside the courtroom and beyond, was something far larger. And that leads us to the question hanging in the air. If the judge's authority could slip so quickly, what else was about to crumble? Stay with me. Because what follows isn't just about law, it's about power, pride, and the moment when justice itself stood trial. The silence after the judge's warning was deafening. You could almost hear hearts pounding, breaths held, thoughts racing. Every person in that courtroom, attorneys, jurors, reporters, even the defendant, knew something had just shifted. This wasn't about the objection anymore. It wasn't about the witness fumbling through answers. It was about the judge. His voice had cracked open the door to doubt. The authority figure, the final word in the room, had just shown something dangerous: vulnerability. The defense attorney didn't miss it. He straightened his notes, placed them deliberately on the desk, and let the silence stretch. He didn't argue. He didn't respond, he just waited. And in that waiting, the gallery felt a shift in power. Because when a judge shouts and an attorney stays calm, who really looks in control? Think about that. Authority relies on perception. Once perception falters, authority weakens. And here, in this charged moment, millions of viewers saw the balance tip. The judge cleared his throat, tapped the gavel once more, and tried to move on. But it was too late. The warning had echoed beyond the chamber. It was trending online within minutes. Clips, captions, reactions flooded feeds. Did this judge just lose it on live TV? Inside the courtroom, whispers buzzed in the gallery until the bailiff hissed for silence. But silence didn't erase the tension. If anything, it magnified it. The prosecutor tried to recover, asking the witness another question, but the damage was visible. The witness's hands trembled, their words stumbled. The defense attorney leaned back, arms folded, wearing a look that said everything: "We've already won the round." And here is the commentary you need to consider. Trials aren't just battles of fact. They are battles of perception. Jurors don't live inside evidence binders, they live inside moments. Moments like this, where emotion, control, and composure outweigh the finest details of testimony, the jurors noticed. You could see it in their posture. One leaned forward, elbows on knees. Another crossed their arms tighter, eyes darting from judge to attorney. They weren't just processing the words, they were reading the theater. And the theater had shifted. The judge knew it too. His jaw tightened as he shuffled papers. His attempt to regain control only emphasized the loss of it. He wasn't just presiding anymore. He was defending himself against the perception that he had gone too far, and the attorney. He pounced subtly, skillfully. Rising for his next question, he kept his tone measured, his words respectful but sharp enough to remind the room who had rattled the most powerful man in it. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I'll proceed carefully, as always." It was a dagger wrapped in silk. Respectful on the surface, but beneath it a reminder: you lost your temper. I didn't. The gallery stirred again. Reporters scribbled furiously, some smirking, others wide-eyed. They knew they had a headline that would outshine the trial itself. Here's where we pull back and reflect. Why do moments like this captivate us? Because power, when it falters, exposes truth. For all the rituals, the robes, the gavels, the courtroom is still a human place. And humans, no matter how high their pedestal, crack under pressure. The rest of the testimony played out like a shadow of itself. Questions asked, answers given, but the energy was elsewhere. The jurors replayed the warning in their heads. The gallery whispered about bias. Online chatter exploded into debates. Was the judge being impartial, or had he shown his cards? And the defendant? He sat straighter now. For the first time since the trial began, he seemed to believe there was hope. Not because the facts had changed, but because perception had. That's the dangerous thing about moments like this. They shift not just narrative, but belief. And belief can decide verdicts as much as evidence. Let me ask you directly, if you were on that jury, would you trust the judge to remain neutral after watching him snap like that? Would you? Or would doubt creep in, whispering that maybe, just maybe, the defense had uncovered a bias the system didn't want you to see? That is the power of live drama. Not staged, not rehearsed, but raw. The kind of moment you can't script, yet it tells a bigger story than any piece of evidence. By the time the witness was dismissed, the judge's warning still lingered like smoke after a fire. No matter how many times he banged the gavel, no matter how many instructions he gave to focus only on the evidence, the room had already absorbed the spectacle. And once a spectacle is seen, it cannot be unseen. The prosecutor tried to regain footing, delivering a fiery argument, but the tone felt forced. The defense, meanwhile, played it perfectly. Calm, steady, patient. They didn't need fireworks, the judge had already provided them. And that brings us to the cliffhanger. If this was the spark, what was coming next? Because when control slips once, it often slips again. And the defense attorney knew it. The gallery sensed it. Even the jury anticipated it. The stage was set for something bigger, something explosive. The kind of moment that would decide not just the case, but the legacy of everyone involved. So here's the question for you, watching from the outside. How far can authority go before it destroys itself? Stay with me, because in part 3, we witness exactly that: the escalation, the pushback, and the breaking point where this judge's warning spiraled into something no one could control. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with an energy you could almost taste. Reporters crowded the benches, cameras clicked as the attorneys filed in, and whispers filled the air. Everyone knew why the room felt different. Yesterday, the judge had crossed a line, and today, all eyes were on him. Would he double down, or would he retreat into formality? The judge entered, robe flowing, face stern. He sat a little straighter than usual, as though posture could restore authority. The gavel struck once, sharp and deliberate. This court is now in session, but posture doesn't erase memory. Every juror, every spectator, every reporter still remembered the warning. They remembered the raised voice, the flash of anger. Authority, once cracked, doesn't mend with formality. It lingers like a bruise that keeps showing under the surface. The prosecutor rose first. He delivered his opening words with a kind of forced brightness, like someone pretending nothing had happened. He called the next witness, a polished professional clearly prepped for the spotlight. The strategy was obvious: steer the narrative back to evidence, away from drama. But drama has its own gravity. The defense attorney rose, slow and deliberate, no rush, no wasted motion. He fixed his tie, glanced at the jury, then addressed the court with a calm voice that carried just enough edge. Your Honor, before I proceed, I want to clarify. Am I free to question this witness fully, without risk of another warning? Gasps rippled through the gallery. The words were respectful, yes, but the subtext was a dagger. We all remember what happened yesterday, and I'm not afraid to remind everyone again. The judge's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. Counselor, you will proceed with professionalism, he replied, his tone sharp but measured. The defense attorney nodded lightly. Of course, Your Honor, professionalism is always my priority. To the casual ear, it was a polite exchange. But to those watching closely, it was a duel of perception. The attorney had baited the judge into acknowledging the prior warning, dragging yesterday's ghost back into the spotlight, and in doing so, he reminded the jury who had rattled first. Let us pause here. This is where courtroom strategy shifts from law to psychology. The defense wasn't just defending a client, they were defending control of the narrative. And control, once taken from the judge, doesn't easily return. The cross-examination began. At first, it was simple questions, delivered slowly. The witness answered with rehearsed precision, clearly trained to stay calm. But the defense attorney wasn't after facts yet. He was after cracks. Would you agree, he asked, pacing slowly, that your memory of events relies heavily on notes you reviewed before today? The witness hesitated. Yes, I reviewed my notes. Notes prepared with the prosecution, correct? Yes, but... The attorney raised a hand. Thank you. That's all I needed. The jury shifted. One juror scribbled something furiously. Another tilted her head, brow furrowed. A seed of doubt was planted. The prosecutor leapt to his feet. Objection! Counsel is mischaracterizing the witness's preparation. The judge, already tense, slammed the gavel. Sustained. Counselor, rephrase your question. But it wasn't about the question, it was about the rhythm. The attorney had provoked both the witness and the prosecutor, then forced the judge to intervene. Every outburst fed into the image that the prosecution was flustered, while the defense stayed composed. And here's the commentary you need to hear. In a courtroom, the person who looks calm appears truthful. The one who looks rattled appears defensive. And perception often outweighs fact. The defense pressed on. Each question chipped at credibility, each pause stretched tension, until finally the witness stumbled. Just a flicker, a pause too long, a glance too nervous, but enough. The gallery caught it, the jurors caught it. And that's when the defense attorney delivered the blow. Tell me, sir, are you absolutely certain of what you saw? Certain enough to declare, under oath, that there is no possibility you are mistaken. The witness froze. His lips parted, but no words came. The silence was electric. The prosecutor shouted, "Objection!" almost too quickly, voice cracking. The judge leaned forward. Answer the question. The witness finally spoke, voice trembling. I believe I'm certain. Believe? The attorney's eyebrows arched. Or no? The room gasped. Even the jury seemed to lean forward in unison. The power dynamic had flipped entirely. The judge's hand gripped the gavel tighter. Counselor, you will not badger the witness, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The words hung in the air like smoke. Believe, not know. Now, pause with me. Reflect on this. In trials, doubt is oxygen for the defense. One word believe was enough to plant uncertainty in the minds of 12 jurors. And in this moment, no gavel, no warning, no objection could erase it. The prosecutor tried to redirect, but it came off desperate. The witness stumbled again, this time visibly shaken. The defense attorney stepped back, hands clasped, the image of composure. He didn't need to push further. He had already won this round, and the judge, he looked weary now. His warning yesterday had backfired. His authority was questioned, his courtroom spun into drama, and every move he made only magnified the perception of imbalance. The session ended with the usual gavel strike, but the energy in the room was anything but usual. Reporters bolted outside to file their updates. Social media exploded with clips of the exchange. The trending headline: Defense attorney turns judge's warning into his weapon. And here's the cliffhanger. The moment to leave you holding your breath. If this is what happened when the defense simply asked questions, what would happen when the attorney delivered his closing argument? Because if a warning could unravel the judge, imagine what a full frontal attack on credibility might do. The final day of trial dawned heavy with anticipation. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, cameras flashing, reporters shouting predictions into microphones. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Jurors walked in with quiet focus, aware that this was the day everything would crystallize. The judge entered last, face set in stone. He struck the gavel, but the sound didn't carry the same weight anymore. Authority depends not on wood and echo, but on respect. And after his warning, after the defense attorney's careful dismantling, respect had eroded. The prosecutor rose for closing arguments. His voice was strong, his words deliberate. He painted a picture of responsibility, accountability, and trust in the system. He gestured toward the jury, toward the ideals of truth and justice. On the surface, it was a textbook performance. But here is where commentary matters. Sometimes, textbook doesn't cut it. The jury didn't live inside the words, they lived inside the tension of the trial. And the tension had already framed the prosecutor as reactive, scrambling to hold on while the defense exuded calm control. The prosecutor ended with a flourish, voice raised. This case is about trust. And without trust, there is no justice. He sat down quickly, exhaling, clearly exhausted. The defense attorney rose slowly, no rush. His presence itself was a strategy. Calm, deliberate, confident. He walked toward the jury, then stopped, letting silence stretch. Silence is power when used with precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice low but steady, "this case is not about trust. It is about doubt. Reasonable doubt, and what you have seen here is doubt everywhere you look." He replayed key moments. The witness who admitted he believed but didn't know. The prosecutor's objections that rang of desperation. The judge's warnings that revealed cracks instead of strength. Piece by piece he reconstructed the trial, but through a new lens, a lens of uncertainty. The jury leaned forward. Some nodded, some pursed their lips. "Now ask yourselves," the defense attorney continued, raising his voice slightly, "if doubt appeared in their star witness, if doubt appeared in their arguments, if doubt even appeared in this courtroom itself, how can you convict?" The judge shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just a closing argument, it was a reframing of the entire trial. And then came the moment that sealed it. The attorney paused, letting the silence draw everyone in. Even this courtroom, which should represent order, authority, and fairness, has been shaken by doubt. When the very gavel of justice becomes a tool of anger rather than impartiality, how can you ignore the possibility that the system itself faltered? Gasps audibly from the gallery. The jurors stiffened. The judge's eyes widened, fury barely masked. The prosecutor jumped up. "Objection!" he barked, improper attacking the court itself. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. The gallery had heard it. And the world beyond these walls would hear it too. The judge struck the gavel hard. Sustained. The jury will disregard that statement. But here is the commentary that matters. You cannot unhear what has already echoed. Words, once spoken, cannot be erased. They live, they spread, they stick. The defense attorney bowed his head lightly, almost humble. "Of course, Your Honor. Let me rephrase." He turned back to the jury, voice soft but sharp. "The truth is simple. If you have even one question, one hesitation, one sliver of doubt, then justice demands you choose doubt over blind trust. That is the law. That is your duty." The courtroom was silent, save for the sound of pens scratching. The jury was writing. They were recording the words that would echo in deliberations. The attorney closed with one final line, steady and resolute. "Do not let fear or pressure decide this case. Let doubt speak, because doubt is the voice of justice." He sat. And in that silence, the room felt forever changed. The judge dismissed the jury for deliberation, gavel slamming once more. But it sounded less like command and more like surrender. The hours that followed were filled with tension. Reporters paced outside, commentators speculated live on television, and social media exploded with clips and memes. The phrase, "doubt is the voice of justice," trended worldwide. When the jury finally returned, the foreperson rose. "We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty," the gallery erupted. Gasps, cheers, cries, chaos in every direction. The defense attorney closed his eyes briefly, then looked toward his client, nodding once. Victory had come, but not just through facts, through perception, strategy, and one misstep by the judge that spiraled beyond control. The judge sat motionless, face unreadable, but everyone knew the truth. His warning, the very act meant to assert dominance, had instead undermined him. Authority slipped away the moment his voice carried more anger than law. And here's where the reflection must land. Justice is not only about verdicts. It's about the perception of fairness. A single warning, issued in anger, reminded the world that even those who wear robes are human and humanity can falter. The trial ended, but its echoes remained. In the days that followed, headlines blazed across screens. Judge's warning backfires. Defense turns courtroom chaos into acquittal. When authority loses control, clips flooded social feeds, dissected frame by frame. Commentators argued whether the defense attorney had gone too far, whether the judge had mishandled his authority, whether the jury had been swayed more by drama than fact. But one thing was undeniable. The warning had become bigger than the trial. It was a symbol, a lesson. And so I leave you with this thought: power is fragile. Authority, once shaken, is nearly impossible to reclaim. In this courtroom, a single moment, a warning shouted too far, altered the course of justice. If you believe truth deserves to shine brighter than arrogance, share this story. Subscribe to stay with us for more courtroom drama, political showdowns, and moments where power collides with justice. Because in the end, it is not just about who wins or loses, it is about what we learn when authority is tested.